With the NBA trade deadline behind us and with so many moves and transactions made throughout the league, this was one of the more active trade deadlines we have seen in years. But after the dust settles and trying to keep up with all the moves that went down, it's always fun to break down some of these trades and who were some of the biggest winners and losers of the trade deadline, which, let me be clear, is way too early to be crowning winners and losers of a trade deadline when we've barely seen any results. And it's possible in a couple seasons, maybe some of the winners end up becoming losers and vice versa. But based on what we know right now, knowing what some teams needed to do to beef up their roster or hitting the reset button, in this video we're going to be discussing the biggest winners and losers of the NBA trade deadline and what it means for each of these teams going forward. Also, a big shout out to today's sponsor, Aura, but more on that in a little bit. If you're new to the channel and you enjoy this type of content, feel free to subscribe and hit that notification bell. We just passed 10,000 subscribers. I cannot thank you guys enough for all the support and love on the channel. About 88% of you watching are still not subscribed to the channel. It would mean a great deal to me if you sub to help it grow. Now, this was a wild trade deadline, one of the most active deadlines we have seen. A lot of players were moved, second round picks were getting thrown out like candy, players getting moved for salary dump purposes and likely to be bought out. But then there were also a lot of players who were in a lot of trade rumors, high asking prices from their teams, and they didn't get moved. Guys like OG Anunoby, John Collins, Alex Caruso, Fred VanVleet, and then of course you had the one that no one expected to be moved. Well, at least no one thought that they were going to be moved anyway until Kyrie Irving demanded a trade, and that was Kevin Durant getting traded to the Phoenix Suns. And I'm actually going to start there in talking about the biggest winners of the deadline, and it's not the Phoenix Suns, it's actually the Brooklyn Nets. I know a lot of people are going to say this is a bad take, but I actually think the Brooklyn Nets came out the biggest winner of the NBA trade deadline. And here's why. Well, first, let me be clear. This does not mean I'm absolving the Nets of the complete failure and disappointment of their big three that they assembled. The fact that they moved heaven and earth to put Durant, Kyrie Irving, and James Harden together on the same team and only managed to win one playoff series will go down as one of the biggest disappointments in the history of sports. But as far as this trade deadline in particular, all the on-court, off-court drama, the PR nightmares, the toxicity in the locker room, players demanding trades, then agreeing to stay, then demanding trades yet again. They had their backs up against a wall, knowing they had to trade these players with little leverage. And what did they manage to do? They got out of the toxic environment and culture that they created, managed to get 5 first-round picks between Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, all of which are unprotected picks, which gets them back all the draft capital they lost in trading for James Harden. Not only that, they also were able to bring in my opinion, high-quality young players in Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson. They flipped Jay Crowder for 5 second-round picks, so more draft assets. And then the Mavs, they got also Spencer Dinwiddie and Dorian Finney-Smith. Not saying those guys are star-level players, and they're a bit older, but they're solid role players, and they're still in their primes. And really, ever since making these trades, the whole vibe and energy of that team is completely different. They're playing solid basketball, and you look at their lineup, and it's actually a fun and exciting team, both for now and for the future. The other winner I have on this list, the LA Lakers. Never thought I would say this, but they made out pretty well given they knew they had to do something to make a playoff push while LeBron is in the final years of playing at an elite level. Although we've been saying that for years now that this is going to be LeBron's final years. But the 3-team trade in which they were able to move off of Westbrook's contract and only have to give up 1 first-round pick to do so, and the pick even had light protections on it as well. Throughout this time period, Westbrook has been in trade rumors. It was believed that the Lakers would have to give up 2 first-round picks, both unprotected, in 2027 and 2029. And not only did they just have to give up 1 first-round pick, they were able to bring in D'Angelo Russell, who, yes, has his flaws, but he's a better point guard than Westbrook, and he's in his prime. They get Jared Vanderbilt, who I think is a very young, underrated player who fits a need on their roster for defense and rebounding, and then Malik Beasley, which gives them some outside shooting. They were also able to get Mo Bamba for basically nothing and moving on from Patrick Beverley, and then, of course, they also got Rui Hachimura as one of the first trades leading up to the deadline. I'm not saying that these moves are going to make the Lakers contenders now. They're probably not even going to make it as a top 6 seed in the West with how stacked that conference is, but they're more likely going to be a play-in team than missing it entirely like they were before, and I could see them sneaking into the playoffs barring the health of Anthony Davis and LeBron James. Another team I would have pegged as a winner, and I'll probably still consider them a winner even if the trade does fall through, and that's the Golden State Warriors. Now again, at the time of this recording, because of the failed physical and withholding of information on the part of the Blazers as far as how bad Gary Payton's abdominal injury truly was, could mean this trade falls through. But assuming the Warriors decide to move forward with the trade anyway, the fact that they were able to get Gary Payton back, who was one of their most important role players on that title team last year. I made a video about how the Warriors made a huge mistake in letting Payton go and prioritizing giving Jordan Poole a big contract, because when you look at their on-court, off-court numbers, Payton was one of the Warriors' most impactful players on the defensive end, and it's part of the reason why the Warriors haven't looked as good as they did last season, particularly on defense. Not only that, but they were able to move on from James Wiseman, who I think most will agree by now was a major busted pick for them, selecting him at number 2. And then they also received 3 conditional second-round picks from Atlanta when they flipped Saddiq Bey to the Hawks. But because it's possible this trade either could fall through or Gary Payton is going to need to miss significant time, it makes the Warriors not as big of a winner as the deadline as was initially thought to be. And then the other team, which you still have to consider them to be a winner because they got one of the best players in the world and they were able to maintain their core, and that's the Phoenix Suns. Although I will say, I don't think this is as big of a win as most fans might think it is. First of all, Kevin Durant is still injured, and it's still unclear when his timetable is to return. Now, you would hope that once he does come back, he'll be able to pick up where he left off and be the same KD that we know. But even aside from Kevin Durant, Chris Paul, still a phenomenal player, a great point guard. He's been in and out of the lineup this season as well. The guy is 37 after all and starting to decline. And then giving up Bridges, I think is really going to come back to bite them. I think Bridges is such an underrated player, a great defender. He's blossoming into this great two-way player. He's played his role well in Phoenix, fit there perfectly, and you could even say the same thing for Cam Johnson. And then 4 first-round picks, all unprotected, the last 2 picks in 2027 and 2029. Kevin Durant and Chris Paul will likely already be retired by then, so those picks could be very valuable at that time. Again, I still think they come out as a big winner of the trade deadline because they got Kevin Durant. They're instant title favorites now, but it's championship or bust, and the window is pretty narrow given CP3 and KD's age. Now, before I get into some of the losers of the trade deadline, a quick word from today's sponsor, Aura. Now, I'm sure most of you know anyone can find anything on the internet, including your full legal name, your personal email, your home address, phone number, and even your relatives. And for me personally, I never took this kind of stuff seriously, that people can take your personal data and use it for their own financial gain. Well, in 2016, my wife got her identity stolen, including her social security number, credit card information, and it was a nightmare trying to get everything sorted out. From recouping loans that were taken out in her name, shopping sprees on the credit card, like there are some really bad people out there. It's sad to say, but it's true. Do a Google search for your personal information or someone you know and see if a people's search site shows up. This information is accessible because of data brokers who profit by selling your information to robocallers, telemarketers, spammers, and anyone else that wants to learn more about you. And so for me, protecting mine and my family's personal data and information is of the utmost importance because of that terrible experience we had 7 years ago. That's why I'm excited to tell you about today's sponsor, Aura. Aura will identify data brokers that are exposing your information and automatically submit opt-out requests on your behalf. They will even opt out of junk mail and telemarketing lists. Aura also monitors your emails and passwords to see if they were involved in any data breach and exposed on the dark web. Aura's app also features a VPN, password manager, real-time credit and identity theft monitoring, internet parental controls, and protects your devices from malware. Aura has almost every internet safety tool you'll ever need, all inside one app, which is what makes it so amazing, so that you don't have to use multiple platforms and sites to protect yourself. Let Aura do the hard work of keeping you safe online. If you sign up right now, Aura will give you a 2-week free trial with my link down below. You'll be shocked at how much of your private information Aura finds exposed over those 2 weeks. Guys, I was shocked at how much of my information Aura was able to find when using the app. Go to aura.com/hoops1 to start your free trial, also linked in the description, or you can scan the QR code here. But with that said, let's get back into the video. Now, as I was looking through the list of trades completed by the deadline when thinking about the losers, it's not so much those who made bad trades. It's more so the ones that didn't make moves. And I'm going to start with the Toronto Raptors. Look, I know the Raptors added Jakob Poeltl, which I'm a big Poeltl fan. I think he's a great rim protecting big that has improved his overall scoring. I think Poeltl will make them marginally better. But the main issues that the Raptors have had this season still haven't been solved for. First of all, I was shocked they added another big when they have so many already, and a big that doesn't space the floor, which is something the Raptors also need. And not only that, it's pretty clear this Raptors core doesn't fit well together anymore. Van Fleet, Siakam, Anunoby, Gary Trent Jr. I was shocked they didn't break these guys up. At a minimum, I was sure Anunoby and Van Fleet would be getting moved. And because of where the Raptors find themselves in the standings, 11th in the Eastern Conference, they've struggled all season, very inconsistent play. I'm very surprised they weren't sellers at the deadline, and I really don't think this moves the needle for them much at all. Another loser, Hate to say it, but my Chicago Bulls. I've already talked about this on my Bulls channel, but I cannot fathom how the Bulls front office, after everything we have seen throughout this season, inconsistent play, poor shooting, lack of energy, lack of offensive movement, playing with little pace and just playing stagnant ISO style offense, clearly is not working. And the Bulls did absolutely nothing at the deadline, not a single move. I'm not saying they should have blown it up, although that might have made more sense at this point given how the Bulls have played since the deadline, but to not make any moves whatsoever is a major L. Not when this team has been playing like it has. And yes, the Bulls don't really have a ton of assets to work with by way of a trade. They don't have many picks to work with in a trade, and unless they're shopping their big three, the other players aren't going to represent a ton of value. But come on now, to just stand by idle and say this is the best group we felt we could work with for the remainder of the season is mind-boggling and a huge loss for the Bulls at the deadline. And then finally, the last team I have, the Miami Heat. I know the Heat have been playing better basketball, they've had their own issues with injuries, but for a team that finished first in the East last year, nearly made it to the NBA Finals, and to see the group coming out flat, not having the best roster construction, and for the most part, they kept their team intact aside from moving Dwayne Dedmon at the deadline. I would have thought that they would have tried to get some value in a trade for, say, Max Strus before he's set to become a free agent, as they might not be able to afford him come this offseason, or even look to get out of Robinson's contract and get that off the books, giving up some picks to do so, or even just try to do the same for Kyle Lowry and his unfavorable contract. I just would have expected more from the Heat given their window to win now is closing with Butler getting older, and they have regressed quite a bit from last season. Now, I know there were a lot of other teams that made moves, and if I didn't cover them in this video, it's because I really have them in sort of that neutral zone between being a winner and a loser after the deadline. Like, yes, the Mavs made a big move in getting Kyrie Irving alongside Luka Doncic, but that could very well backfire, as you never really know what Kyrie is going to do and whether he'll actually agree to an extension to stay with the Mavs. And I still think the fit between Kyrie and Luka in the backcourt is going to be questionable. The Hawks made some moves, the Blazers made some moves, as did the 76ers, the Clippers, but none of them really major moves of consequence where you can definitively say that was a winning type move or the trade deadline was a failure for them on their part. But you let me know what you guys think. Who are some of the biggest winners and losers of the trade deadline? Let me know in the comments. Be sure to subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.